as much as the confirmed cases of COVID-19 keep rising, there are those who have also survived, those who have been discharged, and we also, time again, just bring in some of them such that you can get to hear for yourself how some of these things are playing themselves out. This morning, we've got Emmanuel Asika, who is a survivor himself. Good morning, Emmanuel. Thank you for joining us today on the program. How are you feeling this morning?
Good morning.
All right.
Absolutely perfect, yeah.
So how did it all happen?
I think at the initial stage, I had what I considered to be malaria symptoms. I had a bit of a fever, a headache. I think those were the first two telling signs. And then, because I really don't like to self-medicate, I went to present myself to the hospital immediately. And they tested and they did see some malaria. This time I also had diarrhea. And so I was losing fluids and I had lost appetite. So I wasn't eating. So they decided to put me on drips to rehydrate me and try to treat these symptoms I had presented. All right. Now, as time proceeded, they realized that the fever wasn't abating, and I still had diarrhea. And I think this is an important point that I need to pass across. I mean, there are regular symptoms that are like upper respiratory symptoms, cough, and all of that. But people don't realize that diarrhea, sometimes, it's a small percentage, but can also be part of the symptoms for COVID-19. Now, my doctor was very proactive. He was reading widely, and then he came and said, WHO had just added diarrhea as part of the symptoms for COVID-19. And then he suggested that we did a test because I wasn't expecting to be COVID-19 positive. And so I rebuffed that and we delayed for another day or so. And then whilst they, of course, ran other tests, and when these tests were okay, pretty much, but I still had a fever and diarrhea, we decided to do the test. And we did a test after calling in NCDC. And a day later, in 24 hours, I was declared to be positive for COVID-19.
You know, we've seen a trend over time, speaking with survivors. I mean, a lot of people say they maybe got it doing everyday stuff, maybe shaking hands, passing a microphone or documents and stuff. How do you think this happened for you?
And I think this is pretty much what it was, right? Because, it happened suddenly. I was interacting in Lagos. I did have a travel history, but we reviewed the travel history and realized that it was more than 3 weeks, almost a month, so that was ruled out. And so it's really very easy to pass the virus to the next person. And this is also one of the messages that we are pushing very strongly. People do not realize how very, very easy it is to contract the virus. And that's why social distancing is advised. We advise that the people take this very seriously.
So you say your travel history was over a month ago. Means yes. You must have been shocked when you were told that it was positive.
Exactly. So I also had taken it upon myself to take very seriously the protocols. So sanitizing the hands, some form of social distances. Where I work, we had even shut down 2 weeks prior. I think the second week of February, no, the second week of March. So we were really following all the protocols, and I didn't expect, obviously, to be COVID-19 positive. I was shell-shocked, I think, to put it rather lightly. Some people feel symptoms and expect and suspect that maybe they have COVID-19. This wasn't even part of my thought process.
Well, when you say your travel history was over a month, we know that, yes, there's a huge emphasis on check how you've traveled, and they usually give 2 weeks for it to mutate. But then, when you say it's over a month, in communication with them, either the NCDC or your doctors, did they say that it was actually from your travel history, or was it after your travel history, probably you might have contracted through something or somewhere, being back home here or something?
Yeah, so again, after the travel, 2 weeks, there was obviously nothing. 3 weeks, even more. Like I said, we have had conversations about this. Just to be safe, what we did was to ensure that every single person that I have come in contact with was also followed up by the NCDC. So from the hospital, and I must say that the hospital was very proactive. Immediately they suspected that it might be COVID-19. They immediately began the safety protocols. No one was attending to me without face masks, without gloves, without some form of PPE. So they were very proactive in that regard, and they also have gone through the process. So everyone in my workplace as well, for those who have symptoms, everyone pretty much was tested in my house. So the contact tracing was very aggressive, and we saw that we tried to block every loophole. I must say that I have had a very low transmission rate, probably because, and this is one of the reasons why I say that we had to rule out that, because I presented myself immediately at the hospital. I was isolated in some form because I was put in a room where I was alone, and then I had the doctors attend to me. So I think the health workers in Nigeria have been very, very exemplary.
In your opinion, how easy and how detailed would you say the list of contacts you had to draw up for the NCDC to follow up was?
It wasn't easy, but trust me, it was very detailed. And even after I left, after I was discharged and I came back home, we still were going through the list again. I mean, the follow-up for Lagos is amazing. So I've had the doctors call me to say, okay, so let's review the list. Let's go in details. Let's get phone numbers. Obviously, you know, not everyone can be tested except to present symptoms. So we have given thermometers out to people so that they are checking their temperatures, and then the follow-up is morning and evening for over 18 days. I just got the information from one of the doctors that one of the people I got in contact with has been followed up for over 18 days and still no symptoms. So the feedback and the interchange has been very, very good. So it was very detailed, the follow-up that we did with the NCDC.
Well, you have also said that there is a need to emphasize as much as possible some of the issues that are being raised now. But then if you also look at the details that the Lagos State government has put out, you'll see the list of local governments that have been affected. And we also understand that there are a number of people who are not giving details of their travel history. Does that give you concern?
Yes, it does, obviously, because I think that, and I said that in the article that we did recently, that this has a potential to go out of hand if we do not take it seriously and if we do not collaborate to stem the tide of the disease. I think it's sad that some people are not divulging their travel history. I don't know whether it's stigma, whether it's fear, and these are some of the issues we're also trying to address, and hopefully we can do that in a little while. But secondly, and I think this is also important to note, we're doing the incidences of of the disease coming from outside the country have reduced. I think right now we're getting to up to 70 to 80% of community transmission. So the danger really, because the borders have been closed, is really not for cases that are coming from outside the country, but indeed the transmission rate that is going on. Then obviously there's also the stigma and the fear that people have, and people also are not very excited when they talk about going into isolation and the isolation center in Yaba. So these are some of the key points that we try to let the people know that it can be easy to transmit, to contract the virus, and the isolation center, especially for me, was not hell as I thought.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that a little more, but different people exhibit different symptoms. I mean, in your case, you started out with malaria, then doctor said diarrhea had been added to the list, and that was how they got to check. But Some of the regular symptoms of COVID that has been talked about widely. Did you, for instance, experience any shortness of breath? Which ones did you experience?
Excuse me. So yeah, I was in my case, I was quite lucky. I didn't have shortness of breath. I didn't even cough, to be honest. My symptoms were fever, and then I had diarrhea, and I really had, the doctors called it gastroenteritis, so it was centered around my stomach. So I wasn't eating, I was losing fluids, and then I had a temperature. The temperature resolved itself very quickly once my case was being managed at the isolation center. But the diarrhea and generally the GI gastroenteritis lasted for quite a while. So I was throwing up, I was stooling. Yeah.
Had nothing to do with any respiratory symptom at all. You had no respiratory symptom, just malaria and diarrhea.
Yes, not at all. No respiratory symptoms.
Wow. That opens up another vista, because prior to this point, we've had people tell us, the symptoms they had. I think I recall someone actually telling us he vomited. We had someone sharing his experience, but seeing that you had different type of symptoms, it's quite intriguing, and to speak the less. But I was reading through your account on Nigeria Health Watch, and I saw the point where you said you went for a meeting after you were discharged. By the way, we'll talk about your experience at the IDH, but I just wanted to put this in briefly. So you said you were discharged and you went for a meeting in your estate, and then you broke the ice and told people, well, I just recovered from COVID-19. How did that play out? Did they scamper for safety, or really come around you and say, well, we're here for you?
Yeah, so just to also shed some light, it was not just a social gathering. We were trying to tackle the escalating security concerns. And so we had to call an emergency meeting to try to resolve that in my estate. And so, yeah, I know a lot of people were suspecting, because, ambulances had come in to test the people in my house. I just had to break the ice and tell them, look, guys, no need to suspect. I was the one who had COVID-19. I recovered. I have 3 negatives. I tried to educate them as much as possible. I didn't see any stigma. People pretty much came to me saying, congratulations, we're really, really excited that you made it. Obviously, it's a communal setting, so almost every other person knows every other person to some degree. So they were very happy for me. More importantly, we say, as regards stigma, we are the ones who really should be afraid of other people. So I try to maintain distance from the next person, because I know my status. I've been tested negative. I've been tested multiple times, but I've come back with a negative result 3 times. So if anything, I'm the one who is scared of people giving me the infection again, so I possibly could get reinfected. But aside that, it's been, and then after I put out the story on through Nigeria Health Watch, it's been amazing feedback from people, lots of support. And more importantly, people are beginning to see that this disease is real. It has hit home. It's someone who they know, and so people are taking it a bit more seriously.
What do you think about this? I mean, when you talk about it hitting home, telling people, well, don't worry, I'm the one who had this, I've recovered, then they reached out to you. There's been this conversation as to whether or not the authorities should just actually publish the areas. I know Lagos is doing something similar. Publish the areas that these cases are, such that people can indeed know that it's closer to them than perhaps they think. Do you think it's a good idea to do that?
I've seen it in Lagos. I think, so I just tell you briefly about what happened as well in my own estate. People were just going about their normal activities. Nobody was really feeling that this disease was close, to them. But when they heard that someone in the estate had gotten the disease, I can tell you for free that people began to sit up. So there was some people used to go socialize. Even though I had never been to where they socialize in the estate, but once they heard that, oh my God, someone in the estate had got it, people began to stop socializing and spend more time indoors. So I think Lagos, the blueprint for Lagos,
I mean, if I were the one too, so I won't blame people for that.
Definitely, and you know it's human to always sit up when it hits home all of a sudden. But I like for us to be a bit more proactive. We shouldn't wait for some of these things to happen or to hit home before we sit up. How about we sit up so when it hits home, we're ready for it, or it won't even hit home eventually. It's interesting to hear his
And,
account, honestly.
here where people are talking about stigmatization, but first of all, it's good to know that that didn't happen to him, and people are handling that really well. But he also did say, look, he's the one now who is cautious about those who don't have it. So those who don't have it think that, well, they need to keep away from those who have it.
But he's the one keeping
But those
away
who have it
from
are the ones keeping away from those who don't. So,
because
yeah, that's how
apparently
life is.
there's a risk of reinfection. And I mean, I know that there's been, we keep saying this is novel, we don't know a lot about it,
Yeah.
but over and over again they have said there's that risk of reinfection, which is obviously why he's saying, I'm the one that is scared of anybody coming close to me.
Wow.
Quite remarkable, you know, experience spending 10 days at the IDH. You know, and another thing which we would like to talk about is the fact that during that period, it seemed like the patients formed a bond. Well, his back. So, Emmanuel, I was talking about what happened to you during the 10 days of staying at the IDH. It seemed as though you formed a bond with other patients, because when you talk, you say we have decided, we advocate. So apparently you formed a bond. Is it like an alumnus or alumni situation? What is that like now?
Yeah. So we christened our group the Lagos COVID Gang 2020. So there's a hashtag there. Yes, we did. I mean, and a lot of us are also coming out in public. So I'm sure you would have seen Honorable Buki Olakpade, who's also, I think, been on channels. And there's also Seun Otolorin. So we are collectively saying, let's do this. We can make a difference. And so we're out there spreading services as much as we can. And so I have also spoken to the doctors. Every single person in my ward, we were about 16 at first. Eventually, we were split into various wards. But every single person has recovered 100%. And if you ask me, and the doctors do confirm this, the camaraderie that we had, the fact that everyone was responsible for every other person, the fact that we formed that strong bond that you mentioned, was key to our recovery. And then we remember we also did a video where we were we're thanking the health workers for the great job that they're doing, that we can never overemphasize. But yes, the camaraderie was there, and we still have a WhatsApp group today where we communicate, and then we check up on one another.
While still on the IDH, your IDH experience, while there, did you by any chance find out, from other, patients like yourself at the time, if their experiences, their symptoms differed from yours? Are there any other peculiar symptoms that some of them, manifested different from yours, of course, but maybe a little different from what's been touted by governments?
No. So we had the classic symptoms, all right? So we had people who had respiratory issues. People had shortness of breath. A lot of people had diarrhea. That also was some of the side effects for some people after they began taking the medication. People had temperature. People also, some people were seriously depressed. So we had to rally around to try to help people. And also one of the reasons why we kept talking, kept having those conversations. So the regular symptoms of COVID-19 were evident in so many other people. So I was peculiar. Some people were also asymptomatic, just to also mention. But we did have people who had very serious cases. In my ward, we didn't have any person who went on a ventilator. But I do know that there were people in the facility who were on ventilators. So we had from mild to semi-serious to very serious issues, and we witnessed all of these. So in terms of the apprehension, everyone, all the anxiety, everyone at some point felt that you're waking up every day, you are hoping that your situation didn't deteriorate or escalate, because we had people who came in who had mild symptoms and who eventually had their condition worsen and then eventually get better.
Tell us about the treatments you received. I know you had the different matter that they were attending to before you eventually got tested. So how did the treatment go for you?
So it was so like I said also in the article, treatment was personalized. The doctors, so we had our blood pressure and temperature, our vitals taken on a daily basis, 2 times at the very least. So once you had underlying illnesses, they would also try to cater to that. And then we had medication to help reduce the viral load, so that your immunity could kick in, your immune system could kick in and fight the disease. So pretty much just like it's done all over the world, you manage the symptoms, manage the headaches for some people, manage the fever for some people, for those who had diarrhea and who were vomiting, like in my case. So I had, because my vomiting also persisted for almost 7 to 8 days out of the entire 10 days. Interestingly, even after I tested negative, I still had some symptoms that I had to treat. So they treated those symptoms, and then very importantly, they tried to address the viral load and try to see how they could reduce the viral load so that your immune system could kick in. What is important, what's interesting is that even after most people tested negative, they still needed a period to recuperate and then for the bodies to get adjusted to life without the virus. And that exhibited itself in different ways for different people.
You know, we have talked about the unsung heroes of this battle, maybe not enough. And I'd like you to help us, shed some more light, help us, walk us through how, the medical workers, the work they had to do, the sacrifice they had to make. If you could just give us a picture of that so people can understand how this fight is at the front lines.
So we live in Nigeria. Things are clearly far from ideal. You know that health workers in the country in general are probably not paid as much as they ought to be paid. I know in some cases, in most cases, insurance is even an issue. And yet you have guys, men and women, who are taking it upon themselves to treat people who have a deadly virus. Some of them have already paid the ultimate price and have lost their lives. So every day they go to work, they know that they are in a life or death situation, and so they come in and they still go to do the job. They know things are not ideal. Some of them can't even see their families. Like I mentioned, most of them in the article, I mentioned that most of them are now living in accommodations close to the hospital so that they can stay away from their families and not transfer the risk to their families. And in all of this, they still maintain their professionalism. They still maintain a beautiful spirit. They didn't make us feel like we were bugging them. And obviously, you know that people really want to know what's happening to them. People's bodies are changing. So we are always constantly asking questions, sometimes repeating the same questions over and over again. And never once did I see any of them lose their cool. They always responded very, very calmly and professionally. And they went out of their way to try to make us comfortable. For me, I even had the numbers of most of the doctors and some of the nurses where I called them on a regular basis. We're constantly conferring, and sometimes even after their working hours. So these guys are superheroes, trust me. We looked for every opportunity to express this. That's what gave birth to the video that went viral. It's amazing. It's amazing how they contribute to this. We will be on the front lines. The governor will probably get kudos for the job he's doing, but these guys are behind the scenes, sacrificing every single second to ensure that some of us come out healthy and alive.
I have 2 bullets for you, and I'd like you to take them right quick. 1.
It's a survival. Fire the bullet.
Okay.
Bring it on.
Okay. First, how vulnerable do you think the healthcare workers are? And then, and what do you think government should do to ensure that they are well taken care of? And secondly, how is life after COVID-19 for you? Are you back to work?
Could you take the first question again? I think I didn't get that.
Yeah, I was trying to find out, in your opinion, how vulnerable do you think the healthcare workers are? What do you think government should do to support them? And the second one, of course, how is life after COVID-19 for you? Very quickly.
So vulnerable in terms of the job that they do, clearly, they are quite vulnerable. But in terms of hazard allowances, insurance and all of that, I do know that in Lagos, the governor has mentioned that he's looking into this and he'll definitely implement it. I trust that he will do that. I think that all states and indeed the country should follow suit and ensure that these people are well taken care of. Life after COVID-19, pretty much what I'm focusing on now is to ensure that the message gets out there. We see the escalating numbers every day. We know that we are in no position to contain an outbreak in terms of infrastructure. If we have 10,000, 15,000, this country will literally shut down. So we need to take the lockdown very seriously. And I think that people should not self-medicate. If you have symptoms, please call NCDC. The isolation center is better than you think, and you will get better if you are treated directly by professionals. I am transiting back to work, but I'm trying to make it a phased transition. Hopefully, I should be back to speed 100% by next week.
All right, Emmanuel, I don't know if it'll be a bad idea for the Lagos COVID gang to, flank the Lagos State governor and the EXCO when they're having those usual press briefings, such that they could also send and then pass on a certain kind of message to those who will be watching. It is indeed an incredible story. So thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning, and all the best.